I want to assure residents that we will not allow a well-run city to run out of water.
Not since 9/11 has a city faced such a major crisis. There is no example in the world where a major city has run out of water, and we have to do everything possible, everything, to prevent that eventuality.
Tensions having boiled over repeatedly in the last week, they want the local municipality dissolved. Today, a government delegation addressed residents, but tempers flared once again.
A terrifying, futuristic scenario of mayhem over water shortages. This hasn't happened yet in a country that already deals with frequent and often violent protests for improved education, electricity, sanitation and housing. We can survive without electricity, without decent housing and poor sanitation, but we cannot live without water. Yet we are already preparing ourselves for the worst, ironically, in a world-class city.
Because the province is constitutionally mandated to deal with disasters, I have now stepped in to deal with the situation, because this will be the disaster above all disasters. No city in the world has had to deal with such a situation as the taps running dry.
Doomsday prophecies, based on scientific evidence, are extremely effective in galvanizing action. But panic can also assume a truth of its own, disconnected from facts.
A lot of people have said that Cape Town will be the first city in the world to run out of water. Absolute nonsense. There's plenty of cities that have done just the same thing. Sao Paulo in Brazil ran out of water. Barcelona in Spain ran out of water. What was interesting in both those cases is that they had a situation where the city government was one party, the national government was another party, the state government in Brazil was a third party, and funnily enough, they didn't cooperate very well. And then they had a crisis, and then eventually somebody had to step in and resolve it.
Cape Town water is provided by 5 dams, but drought has reduced the levels of these dams to a mere 22.6%. The largest of these, the Theewaterskloof Dam near Villiersdorp, is at 11.7 capacity, compared to 30% in 2017. If water levels drop to 10%, we have been told that the municipality will have to shut off the taps.
We can still avoid it, and that must be our first option. If everyone uses less than 50 litres of water per person per day. And that is not difficult if we all put our minds to it in our homes and in our workplaces.
We were first warned that Day Zero would be in March this year, then it was extended to April, then May, then June, and now to July.
We've been seen steady reductions in the level of consumption, so we want to keep that going. But should we reach a Day Zero scenario, there are some basic health issues then that start becoming a risk.
So what exactly has been set up for Day Zero, should it arrive? For Cape Town's 4 million citizens, 200 water points have been set up throughout the city. That is roughly 5,000 people per station. Citizens will have to queue to collect a maximum of 25 litres each.
The water collection sites will be very unpleasant, but even if we run them perfectly, and I give you our commitment that we know what we're doing, we have an extremely experienced team in disaster management. That said, even if they're perfectly run, there's still going to be a huge inconvenience. It will have economic and social impacts which we can't even begin to anticipate.
The threat of Day Zero has caused mass panic.
Initially, That's something that everybody was just never minded about. But now when you see all the people coming here, you realize that it's actually something really serious.
If you just have to go to a builder's warehouse and see that there's no JoJo tanks left and realize how serious Capetonians are taking it, or go to your local retailer and see that the 5-litre water bottles are being yanked off the shelf. I mean, they don't even get to the shelf, they just get yanked off as soon as they get into the stores.
They are trying to play political games among themselves, and they're trying to exaggerate and worsen the actual crisis.
But there are also comical elements to extract from a potential catastrophe, like the meme of Mayor Patricia de Lille depicted as Patricia, Queen of the Desert, or former President Jacob Zuma's promise to step down when it rained in Cape Town. Well, the rains came, and the rest is history. But day zero still looms, albeit a little further away, and the logistics alone are daunting.
The security plan alone is 120 pages. So there are multiple plans here that deal with the economic security, that deal with the social security, and how we infect the distribution points.
But would it be the first time Capetonians have had to queue for water?
Cape Town's had lots of water crises in the past. 100 years ago exactly, they had a water crisis and they were arguing about which solution to adopt. And there's a lovely cartoon which was printed at the time showing a lot of people queuing up for water in front of Cape Town City Hall, and the title was, "Will it come to this?" And it's just what's happening here.
Professor Michael Muller was the former Director General of Water Affairs and Forestry from 1997 to 2005. A civil engineer by profession, he is globally acknowledged as an expert on water security.
Cape Town's water comes from a system that serves other towns, that serves other users. There's a lot of farmers who use water from the same system that Cape Town takes its system. The problem has been the management of the system is quite a complex business. All three spheres of government have to come together, discuss what the state of the system is, how much water there is, do we need to restrict consumption.
But progress has been hampered by lack of coordination between national, provincial and local government.
We have, as institutions of civil engineering, we've said to the politicians at all levels, please cut the volume down, help the people who are trying to fix it, and stop throwing stones at each other. You're just distracting them from doing their work, and you're also causing a bit of panic in the populace.
Cape Town running on empty would have been unthinkable even a year ago, or at least it should have been. In fact, as far back as 2007, the city was warned of an impending water crisis.
A number of alternative sources were identified. They chose to try and get through for longer simply by saving water, reducing water use, rather than bringing new water in. And that's when they hit the drought.
But in 2013, Cape Town was experiencing record rainfalls. At that time, it was also dealing with power outages, courtesy of Eskom's load shedding. The city thought it could last until 2022 with its water conservation.
All of the water experts in the early 2000s in Cape Town and the Western Cape fought like anything to have the Berg River Dam built against massive opposition from the National Department, to the extent that we had to agree to pay it back over time till 2022 from water tariffs in order to get that dam. If we hadn't forced through the building of the Berg River Dam, we would have been out of water long ago, even though it was a national function to build it.
Cape Town's bulk water supply, in fact the entire country's, is the responsibility of the National Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation. Each municipality is tasked with purifying and distributing the water, and the province is mandated to deal with disaster management.
Through bad planning, we're sitting now as a country with a loss of water to the tune of 7 billion rands per annum. Had we planned properly, we could not be in that particular situation. We need to explore groundwater, we need to promote rainwater harvesting, we need to make sure that our stormwater drainage system doesn't just take water away from where it is coming from, but it actually redirects it to another space where you can be able to secure that water. Therefore, planning becomes quite critical.
Even the National Development Plan in 2012 actually said very clearly Cape Town must develop its groundwater and its water reuse by 2017. And they disagreed.
By February 2017, after 2 dry seasons, it was becoming painfully obvious that the mother city was in deep trouble. Water consumption at the time was 830 million litres per day, far exceeding the 700 million litre target. In addition to decreasing demand, the city had to find alternative water supplies.
But it can also help us to free up more resources, to employ more teams that can help us with water leakages, repair old infrastructure. It will also assist us to look how we can use wastewater, treat that water so that we can become drinkable again or pump it back into our dams.
We need to do things very quickly now, such as drill boreholes, such as get expertise to tell us where best we should drill those boreholes without depleting the underground water resources. We need to do environmental impact assessments in order to tap into the Table Mountain aquifer without damaging the water resources.
As winter in the Western Cape approached, the drought was hitting the agricultural sector hard. In October, the city announced that it could run out of water by March 2018, but by then, the DA was experiencing its own stormy weather, with the public spat between the Mayor, de Lille, and MACO Executive for Safety and Security, J.P. Smith, amid allegations of corruption directed at de Lille.
Certain allegations were made against me. I made certain allegations against some other members of the DA. What I'm appealing for is a process where these allegations can be tested.
Once the darling of the DA, Mayor de Lille has come under fire from within the party, and there are calls from the DA leadership to have her ousted.
We regarded it as our responsibility to investigate those matters or have them investigated, because Cape Town is our flagship municipality and we have a brand of good governance, and anything that affects that brand of good governance we need to investigate and correct.
On February the 15th this year, she narrowly survived a vote of no confidence. But as far as the water crisis is concerned, already in January she had been left high and dry, stripped of her leadership powers and replaced by Deputy Mayor Ian Nielsen and MACO member Xanthia Limburg. Having survived her own day zero, de Lille is determined to continue with her executive duties as mayor.
I have never stopped with my mayoral commitments. I've been handing out title deeds, I gave out bursaries, and I've been in the community on a daily basis, like I used to do.
But the DA has suffered reputational damage as a result of the conflict, and the internal divisions have also impacted on the effective handling and communication of the water crisis.
I have not been fully satisfied with how the city has responded to this particular drought crisis. In its communication in particular, has in some instances fallen short. And this lack of clarity is not what citizens should expect from DA government.
It's this combination of essentially the drought, not having invested enough ahead of the drought to avoid the problem, and now what we're trying to do is how to manage the problem. And we hope, certainly the engineers were told, that coordination through the Provincial Disaster Management Centre is now going to be the focal point of all these activities. And there are signs that's beginning to happen.
It's not only the Western Cape that has been suffering from a devastating water crisis. The Northern Cape and Eastern Cape have all been in the grip of a drought for several years. South Africa has now declared it a national disaster. But it's not only the shortage of water that's the problem. The future of our water security on all levels is at risk. And the world is watching.
The one group that is taking notice, by the way, is the United Nations, because we've now got something called the Sustainable Development Goals. And whereas before they just asked the question, do all the people in your country have access to water? And we were able to say, yes, we've got 95% of people who've got access to water because there's pipes in the ground and there's taps on those pipes. They're now asking a different question. They're saying, do people in your country have access to safe and reliable and affordable water? And South Africa, in that regard, from being one of the poster children of the world, is going downhill.
Several decades ago, South Africa did not have a water problem. In fact, along with mining, this vital resource was the fuel that powered the economy. But environmental abuses through irresponsible mining, coupled by an increasingly outdated hydro infrastructure and global climate change, as well as shoddy management, have demanded the implementation of new strategies for future water security.
The problem with water isn't the problem of droughts. The problem of water is people and management of water. So we know that all over the rural areas of South Africa, there are places where you open the tap and no water comes out, or you open the tap and what comes out is too dirty to drink. And that is a management problem.
And while for many Capetonians, consumption of 50 litres per person per day might be regarded as the new normal, for millions of South Africans living in informal settlements or in rural areas, day zero is just another day. In fact, most have never experienced day one in terms of a constant and safe water supply.
We don't think there's nearly enough qualified people in the different spheres of government doing the job. And we think that even where there are good people, they're often not allowed by their political heads to do the job properly. So we're saying to government, and we've said this at all levels, you really better get your act together because this is going to come back and bite you.
At a recent Cape Town media briefing, all three spheres of government presented a united front on the water crisis.
We must commend our city of Cape Town. They have done everything within their ability, including the mobilization of capable men and women who are part of the Water Resilience Committee. What we must do is to make sure, therefore, that we disseminate the information and we act at an appropriate time once the warning is being conveyed.
But for several years, the National Department of Water and Sanitation has been in the eye of its own mismanagement storm and drowning in debt. In August 22, 2017, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts lambasted the Department of Water and Sanitation for wasting millions of taxpayers' money on fruitless and wasteful expenditure, amounting to 87.2 million rand, and irregular expenditure amounting to 2.5 billion rand.
And then what about the 87 million again? When are we going to get that?
We are now instituting a forensic investigation on some of the issues. Secondly, there are disciplinary actions that are being instituted, not only to senior managers, but also to those that are working on individual projects, including from our own implementing agents, as I've said.
Much of the irregular expenditure dates back to 2008, when Lindiwe Hendricks was Minister of Water Affairs. In that year, a report by the Democratic Alliance entitled Storm Warning, a Looming Water Crisis paints a gloomy picture of a government ignoring the warnings of a dysfunctional system, including polluted water sources, poor management of dams, sewage works, and treatment plants.
The kind of water crises we have in Cape Town should be a wake-up call, because Cape Town is quite a well-managed city, and yet they are facing this kind of crisis.
But in Cape Town, many residents are now up in arms over the water crisis. They accuse the city of poor planning, mismanagement, and of attempting to privatise water by getting companies to install prepaid water meter management systems in low-income neighbourhoods, many of which are leaking and defective.
In the past there are meters, but this moves it to prepaid meters, and not only that, but it puts the onus on the resident to actually pay for that particular meter, and it is a direct move to commodify water. So it is the government seizing control, in fact not just the government, but they could farm it out to big business. Big business basically getting control of the water to make profits out of that.
We observed that in a single street there were at least 2 leaking water meters, creating puddles and streams of water, possibly thousands of litres being wasted in a city whose water-saving logo is "Every drop counts."
Because the water devices are defective, they are cutting off. You know, they open up 4 o'clock in the morning. By 6 o'clock, because of the leak in the device, the water is up, so people can't flush the toilet, they can't wash their hands. Some schools have even stopped people from using taps, the students from using taps to wash their hands.
And now disaster management is at full speed, warning of all eventualities, including water-related diseases.
Some of them are notifiable conditions. Those are cholera, food poisoning, where it affects more than 4 people, typhoid, hepatitis A, and of course, new in the picture is listeria.
Augmentation projects are also at full throttle, like this project in the Cape Flats, one of 7 aquifers being drilled to provide water to the parched city. Apparently, 12 more are in the pipeline.
You don't want to rely too much on it, but it is a resource which you can use in an emergency. And if you manage it well, you can probably store some water in that groundwater for times which are tough. And there is plenty of other sources of groundwater available, but they have to be developed and understood before you can really take lots of water from them. That should have been done a bit earlier, perhaps, and it's now being done in a great rush.
Desalination plants are also being built, like this one in the Strand. But like the aquifers, they are being constructed at great expense, in haste, and without proper environmental impact assessments.
In a panic, you always hear people say, why don't we desalinate? And the answer is because it costs a huge amount of money, and there are cheaper things to do. You know, do the cheap things first, and then prepare slowly and make sure you get the best possible desalination for your buck.
And 8 years ago, an environmental researcher uncovered 36 underground springs flowing through tunnels into the sea that had been camouflaged for hundreds of years by city buildings. Could these untapped water resources be used by the city, possibly as a source of potable water?
People say, oh, well, the water's not potable. The water is potable. In many areas, the water is potable. SAB Miller has historical rights over the Newland Spring and the Komiki Spring, and they're making 1 million litres of beer per day. And as we know, it takes 4 million litres of water just to produce 1 million litres of beer.
And what began as a trickle is turning into a flood as anxious residents queue for hours.
Sometimes I'm not quite sure why, whether they're taking water because they've already used 50 litres at home, whether they're building up a stock, whether they're selling it. And we know that some people are collecting water in Newlands and selling it off the back of buckies.
In a climate of fear, business booms. But community organisations have taken on multinationals like Coca-Cola and SAB Miller, who for many years have enjoyed access to the city's natural springs and taps to bottle their beverages.
We hear that they are using 550 million litres for the year, so that's a huge amount of water that they're using from our tap water. At the moment, the only thing that they are doing is offering a discount on the bottled water. We're saying that's not enough, because most of our people cannot afford bottled water. They need to have a plan to give water to the people in the North Cape. Number 2, they need to have a plan to give water to the people in the Eastern Cape. Number 3, they need to have a response to give water to people in Elsenburg, in Stellenbosch, because those farm workers are sitting without water right now. Then we said to them, there are 3 other areas in Cape Town where there's an immediate need for water.
But there have also been unlimited reservoirs of goodwill, like the 10 million cubic litres released to the city by the Groenland Farmers Association in the Overberg region. This gesture, the city has said, will help to stave off day zero.
We haven't really talked much about after day zero. What happens next? If there's no day zero, what are we going to do next? And one of the issues that I think needs to be addressed now is to tell people what we're going to do if we reach October and the rain hasn't been as good as we hoped. So Cape Town ought to be getting itself ready to live with this restricted water supply, potentially for another 1 or 2 years.
Hopefully, Cape Town has finally grown up, and together with the rest of South Africa, we're becoming more water-wise. The threat of day zero or not, we have reached the point of do or dry. Hopefully, we'll be among the first to do it right.